A reading from Matthew, the 3rd chapter. I'm reading from the Revised English Bible translation. Listen for God's word to us. Then Jesus arrived at the Jordan from Galilee and came to John to be baptized by him. John tried to dissuade him. "Do you come to me?" he said. "It is I who need to be baptized by you." Jesus replied, "Let it be so for the present. It is right for us to do all that God requires." Then John allowed him to come. No sooner had Jesus been baptized and come up out of the water that the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove to alight on him. And there came a voice from heaven saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I take delight." The word of the Lord. It was the morning after the tornado, and I pulled out my clerical shirt and my clerical collar that I used to wear on a regular basis. I jumped in the car, and I drove 40 minutes from northeast Fort Worth to South Dallas County. An F5 tornado had obliterated the center of the town where I, Diana, and David had lived for 5 years, where I had served a church. We had moved to our new community just 7 months before the tornado hit. That collar came in handy, I knew it would. It got me past the police. The police, who were denying access to the hardest hit area, were only letting in certain folks, and I managed to get past them. I parked. I walked over to the town square, or what used to be the town square. It was pretty much gone. And just across the street from the town square was First Presbyterian Church, and I walked over there, and there were several former church members and the interim pastor, and they were cleaning up the debris around the church. Then I walked over to the neighborhood where we had lived. Our house wasn't there, basically. There were a few bits and pieces of it, but mostly gone. All up and down the block was rubble and uprooted trees and gutted houses open to the sky. It was devastation beyond anything I had ever seen or experienced. And I wanted so badly to help those people. I wanted so badly to ease the pain just a little, to stand in solidarity with these people that I had loved and still loved, to share somehow the burden they were experiencing. But like some politicians and media personalities and entertainers who show up at disasters and assure the dazed victims, "We're with you," I couldn't really feel their pain. I couldn't truly experience the pain they were going through. I hadn't known the terror that they had known the night before. There was this distance between us. And I felt it as soon as I got there. All I could really do was to cry for them, for that town, to gather up some supplies from the new church and bring them, and to send money, and that was it. Jesus comes to the Jordan River from Galilee to be baptized. This guy, John, is going through this ritual with many people, this ritual of cleansing, this water ritual where people confess their sins and where they repent, they turn their lives around to prepare for this new thing that God is about to do in the world. And John realizes who this particular Galilean is. He knows this is the one who is the Messiah. And John, when he is asked to baptize this Jesus, he stammers an objection. And he says, "No, Jesus, you're not like these other people. You're not like these broken, messed up, needy people. You're the Messiah. You ought to be baptizing me. I can't do this." And Jesus says simply, "It is right for us to do what God requires." And what does God require? Well, God requires that the beloved Son not stand back as a passive observer to the people's pain. God asks the beloved Son not to play the tourist who just passes through people's lives and the darkness they have to live with. What God asks of the Son is to enter into that darkness, to enter fully into the darkness and the pain of those people. He is to carry the burden of their sickness on his back. He is to stand with them in all of their weakness and need. He is to be one with them, one of them, one of us. When Jesus steps into those brown, muddy waters of the Jordan, God steps into the whirlwind of human life. And God calms the storms. And God erases the distance between God and us. Wednesdays together have resumed. It resumed last Wednesday. Wednesdays together, if you don't know, is a time where adults and children come to the church and we share a meal. And then the kids go off to the various choirs and we have the adults stay and we offer a Bible study and something related to faith and family issues. I was in the fellowship hall and I noticed one of our adults having a conversation with a little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, maybe 3 or 4, really. There's nothing like a conversation with a 4-year-old, of course. And this adult got down on his haunches, a word we don't use very often anymore. He squatted down so that he would be eye level with that little boy. He didn't stand up tall and tower over this little kid. He chose to be on the child's level, to be right there for him. In Jesus' baptism, God bends down to our sinful situation. God chooses to be on our level. God comes to us where we are and how we are. And God lifts our shame and calms our fears and shines the light of love into our dark places and stands beside us in our need. Can we even begin to grasp the wonder of a God who squats down to look us in the eye? Who takes us as we are, all of what we are, not just the good and pretty parts. A friend of mine a friend of ours came over to the house the other night. We were doing what we often do, which is listening to music and visiting. And suddenly this friend remembered that she had heard a song performed live by a group recently in concert, and that song fit the conversation in the evening. And I'm one person who is grateful for the miracle of streaming music. It's wonderful. So we punched up this song. It was called All My Favorite People. And the chorus goes something like, all my favorite people are broken. Believe me, my heart should know. And goes on to sing, we're all working the graveyard shift. It's a musical way to get at the mystery of Jesus' baptism. Because in this Jesus, God enters into our brokenness. In this Jesus, God enters into the isolation and the loneliness that is often the result of our self-absorbed selves. God works with us in the graveyard shift, in that lonely time of night. In this Jesus, God doesn't despise us. God doesn't turn away from our brokenness, but God embraces that brokenness. This is my beloved Son, in whom I take delight, the voice says of Jesus. And you know, if that is true for Jesus, the Jesus who is one with us, who is one of us, if that is true, it's true for you. And it's true for me. We are the beloved. We are those in whom God takes delight. Accepting that message, even just a little bit, can turn our lives upside down, can turn our lives around. It's the truth that this chasm between holiness and humanness has been bridged by the beloved one. And we who stand stunned and speechless by all the destruction that is inflicted upon us, and by all the destruction we inflict on others and ourselves, we hear the voice breaking through the chaos. You are my beloved. You are the one in whom I take delight. And that cloud of self-criticism, that burden of self-hatred, that weight of shame is lifted by the too good to be true, life-changing proclamation, you are my daughter. You are my son, whom I love dearly, in whom I am well pleased. The end of the story for Jesus and for us is not luxuriating endlessly in the warm, soothing waters of affirmation. The end of the story is not lounging in the hot tub of healthy self-esteem. Jesus comes up out of the water. And the first thing he does is to head for the wilderness, where Jesus faces, struggles with, wrestles with how to be faithful to this God who is in solidarity with the poor, with the lost, with the left out, with the despised and the dismissed, with the oppressed. One way to put it is to say that our calling is to rise from those life-giving waters of baptism again and again, and to wrestle with how we are to say to our fellow sinners, you are God's child. God delights in you. We send that message, I think, not primarily with words, but with humble service to the people who are broken and needy. Whoops, to people just like us. I had a great revelation as a gift. From the one trip I took to El Salvador with this church, we were there just for a few days, spending just a little bit of time with struggling, destitute, joyful Christian people. And they sent a message. The message was something like this: we don't expect people like you, like us, to save us. And we're not asking for people like you, wealthy North American Christians, we're not asking you to fix our lives or to bring us hope. No, what we are telling you is that we are grateful that you have set the time aside and made the effort and spent the money to take this journey to a foreign place, that you have joined with us in working to make our lives a little more livable, that you have accepted our hospitality, because in doing all those things, you are saying to us, we're not forgotten. We matter. We are important to you and to God, the God who calls us beloved. In the four Gospels of the New Testament, we hear a lot about lepers. For people in that time and place, that culture, a leper represented a person who was unclean, a despised, feared person, because their leprosy was understood as God's punishment for some great sin. These are the folks who are marginalized, they are isolated, they are kept away from the clean folk. And in the Gospels, again and again, Jesus breaks through that isolation. Jesus deflects the condemnation of others for them. Jesus breaks through to remove their shame as he reaches out to touch them with healing, love, and acceptance. And when he does that, he faces the wrath of those who evidently don't think that they belong in the group called sinner. And he faces condemnation from the righteous. You may remember a legend about St. Francis and the lepers. Evidently, Francis had quite a phobia of lepers, which, is understandable, but he was disgusted by them. It was a serious phobia. So one day, Francis is on his horse outside of Assisi, and he sees a leper. Legend has it that he stops and he dismounts from the horse and goes up to the leper and kisses him. And when the leper holds out his hand, he puts some money into it, money that he doesn't have. And he goes and he gets back on his horse and he looks around and there's no sign of the leper anywhere. And as he reflected, Francis became convinced that it was Jesus whom he had kissed. And from then on, he had a ministry with that leper colony just outside the city walls of Assisi. We who are baptized into Jesus the Christ, we, like him, are called to touch with healing love and with acceptance those who are considered unclean, those who are unworthy and unacceptable. After all, God's favorite people are broken. Who is the leper waiting for your kiss? To God be the glory, now and always.